Lindsay, and thank you, Creative Mornings, for having me, having the ACLU here. It's odd because I've never been to a Creative Mornings. I don't know where I've been. Right. So when I was thinking about this talk this whole week, I just had knots in my stomach because I only have 20 minutes. I teach a 3-hour class every week. So to cram that all in 20 minutes is going to be a challenge, but we'll get through it. So I'm Marcus Benigno. I direct communications and media advocacy at the ACLU. If you haven't heard of the ACLU, I'm not doing my job well. But if you really haven't heard of the ACLU, you're not alone. Because according to this Twitter user, when we honored Colin Kaepernick last week, but we'll talk about what the ACLU really is later. So context. It's going to be a bit of a stretch, but context matters, right? Context matters in the work that we do as creative professionals. And creatives, all of you, myself, we have tremendous power to shift, reimagine, and create new contexts. Now, when I was thinking about this talk, I could talk about so many different things under this guise. But what I'm not going to be talking about today is you-know-who. And because you-know-who has dominated every conversation, probably every happy hour that you've had in the last year. And frankly, this moment really isn't new. A lot of people are giving so much import to this moment. Like, yes, it's louder, it's more obnoxious, but America has had a long history of hardship. Preach. And we will endure this, and we have endured this, right? I mean, damn those Hollywood liberals, right? So this presentation is about you. But why am I here? Why me? So we begin with spam. So spam, that mystery meat, that delectable, tasty, God who knows what's in it. About a few years ago, when I was in a workshop in Detroit, and they asked me to talk about my story of self, I automatically thought about spam. What Campbell's soup is to Americans generally is what spam is to Filipino Americans. And there's a lot to unpack here. For Filipino Americans, spam is this tasty treat. It's a national sort of cuisine that you wake up in the morning and have on a bed of rice with a fried egg over medium, and that's home. But really, spam came to the Philippines in in World War II. It was a war ration, and really is a vestige of American imperialism. But speaking of spam, in terms of context clues and finding about who I am, why not look at our spam inbox? And what do we learn? On one email it says, share your opinion, dear California voter. So I grew up here in Los Angeles, have been here since I was born, clearly. And then there is one email about Cairo scholars. It's a listserv that folks in Cairo get to learn about different things. And this sort of came up in my spam inbox because I used to be a journalist there. And that's a picture of a domestic worker that I had covered in Cairo. So I was previously a journalist. I get spam from Google AdWords, of course, because I work in the digital sphere, and spam from Stumptown Coffee because I love it. But how did I get to the ACLU? And we begin with a trip to Nepal. So in 2012, in a Nepalese town called Dharan, I met this boy named Najendra. Najendra is 10 years old, and every day when his mom would leave to work, what she would do is she would shackle him to the bed. And she did this because she had no other recourse. And the reason being is that Najendra was addicted to drugs. And in the town of Dharan, and in many countries around the world, there are no resources for children who are addicted to drugs, who are abusing drugs. There are resources for adults, but none for children. So when I was in this town, I covered it, went back to Kathmandu, filed the story, got $1,500, and that was it. That's the expat life. You know, there's beauty, there's power in journalism, but for me, I didn't know, you know, to what end? You know, what change was I really making? And a year later, I moved over to Egypt. Post-revolution, I had sort of examined the effects of the revolution on religious minorities. But then I also started to think, like, you know, this is not my revolution, not my vote, not my struggle. So in 2012, in 2013, I came back to the United States, and I worked and landed a job at the ACLU. So the ACLU, for those of you who don't know, is the American Civil Liberties Union. We have about 53 affiliates across the country, and our main charge is to defend the civil liberties that are guaranteed to you in the Constitution, and to ensure that those rights are actually enjoyed by everyone, by all communities. And we cover issues from education, as many of you may know, free speech, and First Amendment, gender equity, economic justice, LGBTQ rights. And we do this, of course, by fighting in the courts, in the legislature, and with the community. But when I joined the ACLU, I found this listing, an idea list, and it was a position called New Media Strategy. And I remember coming to the office and people were like, "Oh, you're the new media strategist." Yeah, I do new media. And it's like, wait, aren't you the new media strategist? It's like, no. I'm talking about new media. You know, these are new media strategies. That encompasses everything from social to, you know, digital media, multimedia, and whatnot. So it was strange. I'd never done new media. I'd never, you know, really used Twitter or social. So it was evolving, and it was something that I had to sort of learn. But today, I now run the media advocacy department, and we see the importance of new media. If there was not a year that Twitter really played a role, it's definitely this one. And I think a lesson that we should learn in the context of this current age is the power that we definitely see in people, and the importance of how. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
You're doing good.
Thank you. The reason why I'm a bit nervous is because I'm usually engaging with my students and audience, and I engage in questions. But this is a totally different format for me. But truly, you know, we really see this year being the year of the people, the power of people, and there's no other example where we saw the importance of this as in the Muslim ban. And in the first Muslim ban, the ACLU came to the rescue and put an end to, let's see. Ali Vayegan, a green card holder, had returned to LAX after he was deported under the first Muslim ban just a week before. And you can see there's a picture of me right behind him. And this was on the cover of the LA Times. And our attorneys managed to get the stay to really save him from just being completely isolated and deported from his family. But what I wanted to point out was that there was a real intentionality in calling it a Muslim ban. If you remember, the president, the administration, had reinforced this notion of extreme vetting, right? But we knew that that wasn't it, that this was truly an act of discrimination. And so we intentionally put out communiques, messages saying, no Muslim ban. It is a Muslim ban, right? And we had to sort of reiterate and repeat that message to the point where Sean Spicer, of course, mentioned to the White House correspondents that it is not a Muslim ban. But when he did that, that was success on our part. Because by negating the frame, he invoked the frame that we used, right? And therefore ceding power to the message that it truly is a Muslim ban. And of course, media then covered it, and then the protests began. My slides were a little flipped. Another case where I think context really matters in our work was the app called Mobile Justice. How many of you have heard of Mobile Justice? Okay. So back in 2013, when I was first hired as a new media strategist, one of my charges was to reach out to the new generation, right? And lo and behold, my executive director comes into my office and says, "We need an app." I was like, "Why?" And he says, "Well, we need the new kids to read blogs, to read our blogs, to find our information." And I was like, "You don't need an app for that. We're not a news organization. We're not the New York Times." But I was encouraged. I didn't want to sort of like discourage him from this new sort of found realization in the power of technology. So I wanted to see what we can do with this. That said, I'd never ever developed an app in my life. So I did my due diligence and I did some research. I went to other nonprofit apps and I found this one. This is an app brought to you by the Salvation Army. It's a bell app. But it's kind of nifty, right? Because it actually sort of evokes what you think about when you think about the Salvation Army. And that's Santa in front of the Trader Joe's collecting money, right? Asking for your alms to channel into charity. And what's nifty about this is that once you, it rings, it actually has that physical motion and you can change the tone. But there are other pages where you can actually donate through the app, right? So it's not just change, it's actually your own credit card information. So that was helpful. There's branding, there's function, there's the mission of the organization is embedded within. Another app, the AI Candle, Amnesty International's Action Alert app. But what's interesting about this app, it makes sense because the whole mission of Amnesty International is to sort of send letters out, right, to call out atrocities around the world. And you can do that through the app. But what's interesting about this app is that in the interface, what they did was they took the logo, and the gimmick was that the AI Candle was meant to be a flashlight. That app no longer exists, clearly. And so I brought this to my executive director and I said, "Look, we've got, other nonprofits are creating these apps, and here's one example." He says, "Oh, well, our brand is the Statue of Liberty. Maybe we should make a torch app." And we said no, obviously. So, in thinking about this, like what made these apps somewhat successful was that it really brought in, the brand, and it spoke to the real principles and values of those organizations. So I wondered, like, what are our values? Where are our roots? So I looked up our own history, and in May 15, 1923, in San Pedro, which is now in an area now known as Liberty Hill, Upton Sinclair, the famed muckraker and author of The Jungle and other texts, had gone out there to join longshoremen in a strike. He pulled out the Constitution and started reading the First Amendment. Halfway through the First Amendment, officers came up to him and said, "Cut it with that constitutional stuff," and then arrested him. And what's beautiful about this moment is that it was actually photographed. So about 3 months later, he contacts Roger Baldwin, our original founder in New York, who founded the ACLU national office in 1920, and he said, "We should start an affiliate out here," and he did. So Upton Sinclair is our founder, and really, essentially, the ACLU of Southern California was founded because of an illegal arrest, right? Where he was actually asserting his right. Fast forward to 1991, Rodney King. I don't even have to explain this, right? But what was fascinating about this event was that it was also captured, right? So George Holliday miraculously took up his Sony cam and filmed the entire beating of Rodney King by 6 police, and it made the headline news that night. And I remember when we launched the app, Patrisse Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter, who's from LA, was there, and she was describing how this moment was really, a relief for her, because finally, people can see, what has been happening for decades, if not longer, to the Black and brown community. But what's so integral about this moment is that it was captured. And so in 2009, New Year's Eve, Oscar Grant, 22 years old, in Fruitvale Station in Oakland, was shot. Many of you may have seen the film Fruitvale Station by Ryan Coogler. It's a very dramatic and accurate portrayal of the moment. But what's significant about this moment is that it was shot by multiple cameras on phones. And for the first time, you really see the power of mobile phone technology and citizen journalism. And so, in 2015, just about 2 weeks before we launched our app, this happened in Southgate. So what you're seeing is a woman who is filming federal marshals.
The police.
So what's really interesting about that is that there was another woman who was filming her, and it's a little meta, right? But to go back to the case of Oscar Grant, in his case, the officer who shot him was the first officer in California history to be convicted of what ended up being manslaughter. And then he was sentenced to, I believe, like 2 or 3 years, and then was reduced to 6 months. But that would have never happened had there not been footage. None of us would have known his name. Same with Rodney King, right? And so in this instance, we do see that there is obvious evidence of policing, over excessive policing, and abuse of what is your First Amendment right. So we went back, and thought about, development of an app, and how do we sort of take on this issue? And so we developed mobile justice. So that's the app. So we worked with a developer who's based in New York, and Mobile Justice has 3 main functions. It essentially is a recording device, right? 1. 2, it's a reporting device that sends information directly to the ACLU if you have any sort of encounter with law enforcement. And 3, there's this witness function. If you toggle it on and you hit record, anyone in a 3-mile radius will have received a notification of your GPS location if you enabled it, so that they can come to the scene and help film. So when you submit, it sends a copy to the ACLU and then also saves a copy to your phone, right, to preserve and also to review and see if there was anything that was sort of an abuse that we could take legal action on. So to date, we have had in California 255,000 downloads and installs. We need so much more. And currently, the app exists in 19 other states and in DC. We would love to create a national app, but the reason why it's state by state is because the rights are different from state to state, right? There's a whole Know Your Rights library that's in your fingertips, and we also have alerts just for sort of events and actions that we could push to community. So many journalists and many folks have come to us asking, like, so what have you got? What have you received? Have you actually caught anything? But what we realized is that it's not about that. It was never about that. And you'll see why.
Checking students out at East LA College.
Let's go, guys, let's go. Time to go. Time to go. Time to go.
Forgot what it had.
Time to go. Why are you touching me, bro? Why are you touching me, man? Why do you keep touching me? Why are you putting your hands on me? What are you putting me in handcuffs for? That doesn't make sense, dude. You're trying to put me in arrest now? You're trying to take me to jail now?
Can I finish my sentence, please?
No, because I know where your sentence is going, and I'm trying to help you.
I'm trying to ask a question.
So this is going straight to the ACLU for you violating this brother's rights? They ain't even going to advise you of your rights, so it's already an illegal arrest. Thank you. This is going straight to the ACLU for our rights being violated. I'm at a safe space at a safe distance, ma'am. I'm out of your space, sir. I'm not in y'all space, and please don't block my video because you're obstructing justice.
Is there a reason you're recording all this?
It's an ACLU app, just sort of records interactions with the police to make sure things go well.
Okay. Perfect. Satisfactory for your standards?
Yeah, so far.
Perfect.
Thank you both very much.
So those are some of the videos that we received. We received a few, maybe 7,000 videos so far. Most of feet, because people don't realize you could just test, right? But then you get videos like this that sort of demonstrate that it isn't about capturing that moment. It's about empowering people to assert their First Amendment right. You saw in that last video where the officer asked, is this satisfactory for your standards? That guy sat there for 16 minutes filming the entire interaction, up until the officer had medics deliver the guy to a hospital. Who knows what would have happened if that person wasn't there filming, right? So you see it as a tool for empowerment. You see it as a tool for de-escalation. So that for us is victory, right? And Lalo Alkers created this cartoon when we had launched the app, which is really telling. So if you haven't downloaded the app, please download it. And if you are a UX designer, we need a facelift. So I know this theme of context is a stretch, but citizen journalism provides this new context of accountability, like whose context matters, whose truth, whose telling really matters, right? I'm running out of time, but I will run through this. So generally, this has been a pet peeve of mine. Resistance is the mode of the day, but it's not enough. Because what does resistance mean, right? Resistance is like, withstanding a force, resist, right? But what resistance does is that it sort of assumes that what we're trying to keep is good, when in fact it isn't, not necessarily, right? So what I'd like to challenge you to do is to think about different terms, not in the act of resistance, but one that actually assumes more power. Assumes the moment that, it's not about this. It's not about a force that's coming at me. It's about creating new dreams and new hopes. And so this sort of theme of anti-resistance, of elevating our narratives and elevating our own stories and our hopes, has sort of influenced the way we've been doing a lot of our campaigns. And so this is a video that we launched recently and worked with Art Not War and launched about 3 weeks ago, challenging or demanding that our Republican officials vote and pass a Clean Dream Act.
I grew up by the ocean, and the water just becomes a part of you.
My family brought me to Santa Monica Pier for the first time when I was 8. It's still my happy place.
My daughter was born here. The first time I held her, it was the biggest moment of my life.
I work here.
I hike here.
I bike here.
I graduated here. First college graduate in my family.
I fell in love here.
All my memories were created here. California.
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 California is my home.
California is my home.
So we need more good messaging like that, right? We definitely need more good feels. We can't always be in this mode of resistance, fight, 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 because it's exhausting. And then we forget what we're really fighting for, right? We don't want the right to just own all the good stuff, right? They don't get to own family. They don't get to own freedom. And so what I'm calling for you all to do is to join us, right? Maybe not the ACLU, maybe some other social sector, some other nonprofit. But if, like, let's say you're a chef, there's a whole coalition of street vendors who need an ally, right? They're fighting to legalize street vending in LA. If you're an animator or a composer, we need a new Schoolhouse Rock series to sort of, inspire a new generation of activists and citizens. If you're a comic, I need you to go into the streets and ask people and shame them into civic engagement, because how many of you actually know these people? Right. These are our board of supervisors. And so, there's so many things that we can be doing at the local level. It's not about, the ballot box every 4 years. There's a lot of local advocacy that we can be doing. And many people don't even know that the sheriff is an elected official, right? And there's so much power that we see. Like, what's the difference between the board of supervisors and city council? We need more public awareness. We need more public education. If you're an architect, we're about to start this project with a VR company where we want people to sort of experience how it feels to be in the LA jails. And we need pop-ups. And we're looking for sites, and we need sort of that physical experience. So join us. But frankly, again, if you don't have the time or the capacity, do what you do, right? And infuse, these values into anything that you do. What were your dreams before the election? Like, those have not gone away, right? And what will the world look like when we do win? And here's the cheesy end. So dream big, start local, and make shit happen. Seriously. Thanks.